So you've spent some time at the Division 1 level, and now you're with Queens at the Division 2 level. Um,
Yeah.
can you talk about some of the differences between the divisions of play, if there is any, other than obviously the skill? I'm not sure if you're familiar with much of the Division 3 or NAIA, but it's always here to hear a perspective on coaches that have spent some time at different divisions and what the differences are.
Cool. And that's a good question. And I think the way I could answer that question first is one of the biggest, I guess, shrinkages in difference would be, like I said, the social media platforms, the internet platforms, the digital platforms. Especially like even when I was in the Big East, being at that school is very special because we got a lot of those TV games. We got a lot of exposure. And even though it wasn't immediate exposure sometimes too, then you had film and quality film to send out to people to go overseas or expand your basketball game past college. I think the difference now is that a lot of that has shrunk. So now I think Division 2s and Division 3s are even more enticing because maybe instead of going to a Division 1, you might want to better your education or you might want to stay closer to home, but still have your games be on the internet and everything so your family can watch. So from a technical standpoint, like a marketing standpoint, I'd say kids have even more choices now. They're not choosing just the Division 1 label because you could broadcast brand yourself. The school can brand themselves differently, and people could feel more engaged as opposed to feeling lost if you went Division 2 or Division 3. I would say from a player standpoint, I mean, I'm not going to lie. The higher you go up, it's the difference between the NBA and Division 1 guys. The size, athleticism, and that stuff changes. Like, do we have guys who can shoot it just as well as some Division 1 guys? Yeah. But can they run, slide their feet on defense, and do some of those little nuances in the game that sometimes might get lost? Or maybe their arms and hands are a little bit longer than the shooters we have. That kid could probably play Division 1. Sometimes it's physical attributes. So those would be some of the things, and then the last thing, and it's probably one of the beauties of basketball, or at least in the way I look at the game at times, is your swagger, the way you carry yourself. And I even tell our guys sometimes this is that sometimes the Division 1 guys and then even the NBA guys, they have a feel for the game. Like when Ja Morant, a good coach friend of mine, Shane Nichols, coached Ja Morant, and we would talk about how Ja Morant's feel was just very special on the court. Of course, he has athleticism. He could dunk better than anybody. He could shoot it. He could score at all 3 levels. But his feel for the game, no offense to Marquette, but the NCAA tournament, he sort of just was like a magician out there controlling stuff. So I'd say the difference between Division 1, Division 2 sometimes is the feel matched with the general skills and fundamentals. I think just like how you've seen in overseas basketball and getting closer and closing the gap with the USA teams, I think the actual fundamentals that guys can do on the court, skills, shooting, dribbling, passing, have started to get a lot closer. So it's really some of those mental sides of the game, the having a swagger during adversity, coaches saying all the time, next play. And I think now more than ever, us as coaches have to really, and Kevin Love, a lot of people talking about mental health stuff. I think those are another angles that we could do to improve our kids that could help take them to the level that they deserve. There's a lot of kids that don't get opportunities, and I don't want to use the wrong language, but sometimes people say that they're a head case, and they might have good grades, they might have this, but they mentally sort of just can't get through certain things. And that's not a knock on them. It's just how do we handle our emotions during adversity? And I know we're probably going to allude to it later, but that's sort of one thing that I took from a coaching standpoint from the last dance is, if we have a game in Atlantic City, I can't have a kid just go run around and play in the casino. But Phil Jackson really let his athletes be who they are, and how can we de-stress the mental side of what you're going through at certain times. I thought Steve Kerr and Phil Jackson's relationship really spoke along those lines. And it was just, I think those are another things too, is just the mental side of it. Sometimes a Division 1 player will walk in the gym and you'll know it. You don't even have to see him play, just like that kid can hoop. And then it's like, all right, how good can he really be? So I do think that the fundamentals and the skills difference has shrunk. I think it's a lot of sometimes athleticism and really your swagger and your mental side of how you approach the game. Um, Not a lot of kids
Yeah.
waiting for next at the park. I think waiting to have next at the park builds toughness in some kids, as opposed to waiting for your trainer to show up on time. Now the game evolves and everything, but I still think that playing and that mental side of it. And the best part about now is it's okay to talk about that mental side. I mean, the last thing I'll say with regards to it is all my players are getting on me about don't put your hands on your shorts. Now that study just came out and went viral on social media that putting your hands on your knees is actually good. But us as coaches would always say we don't want you to show that you're tired. So it's the give and the take of times changing, and I think really good coaches also do recognize when the times are changing and how we could make these kids still get their potential as opposed to saying, oh, you can't do this or this is the way we used to do things. So I think I answered
Yeah.
a little bit more than your question, but yeah.
No, you hit on a lot of great points. And, I keep hearing confidence and the mental side. Obviously, that's, what Exact is all about. And we try to incorporate that into our camps. And I think, like you said, basketball is a game of so many ups and downs, right? I mean, you can have a night where you just can't miss and everything's going in. And then the next night, it's just, rimming out everything and it's just not going your way. And I think what we're trying to get at is you got to have that next play mentality. You got to be in the present moment and not let the highs get too high and not let the lows get too low, because your confidence within yourself ultimately will lead to success. And I think that's a big part of not just basketball but all sports. And that's kind of the biggest, I think one of the biggest transitions from the college level, high school to college level, is you're not going to be succeeding every time like you would maybe in high school, because it's going to be a lot harder and you're going to be in a position to fail. So I think you got to accept failure and continue that confidence. And like you said, I think that's going to be a big difference maker for the next level athlete.
It could snowball quick. Like say you start not reaching the potentials that you were trying to reach as a top high school player, and you go to a college and now you're almost starting back at ground one and you got to fight for what you want. And so maybe that's a growing pain for you. Next thing you know, you start doing that in your math class and your social studies class. And then now it's like you're not even really used to failure and you're showcasing skills that isn't truly you. And back to what we were saying is that's when we now have to, what's really going on? What's mentally going on? So that way we could get your physical back to your mental. I do think a lot of kids struggle with that sometimes too, especially in college, as you're away from home. And then maybe does your on-court start to dictate what you're doing in the classroom? Because you're not, like you said, some kids are the best in the classroom and the best in their field all throughout high school and in their towns or whatever, and then they come to another level, and sometimes it is a culture shock. So yeah, it's preparation. It's knowing that hey, if this does go wrong, what can I do? And I also think more so than is how to talk. Can you also have that type of personality, go into your coach's office and say, hey, I'm a little messed up right now. I need some help. What can I do better? There were times that I would say to like, hey coach, I think I should be getting more playing time, but what do I need to do? And I think having that all goes back to that swagger and that confidence. Justin Wright Foreman averaged about 2 points per game for us at Hofstra, but he was hungry as a freshman, and then he went on to lead one of the leading scorers in the country, and is now in the NBA. And it's because he always, even though he was experiencing failure and having all these people in the back of his mind, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, he always knew who he was and where he wanted to go, and would find the platforms that would take him there. So yeah, I do agree with that stuff, and that it can be hard for certain players going from being the top dog to then climbing back up the mountain again.
Yeah, that's for sure. And